When a television host became the wife of the world's richest man, the world witnessed not only a story of love, but also one of the most striking transformations in modern celebrity culture. Lauren Sánchez was never just Jeff Bezos' wife long before. She entered his orbit. She had already built her name as a television host, as a woman with a career in entertainment, as a helicopter pilot who broke into a male-dominated field. Yet when her relationship with the Amazon founder went public, the focus of attention shifted from her professional achievements to her evolving appearance. People started to ask what changed, when did it change, and why did it cost nearly $400,000? The truth is that Lauren Sánchez's transformation is not the result of one dramatic moment, but rather a slow, steady evolution that unfolded over more than 2 decades, carefully layered procedure after procedure, always subtle enough to avoid scandal, yet powerful enough to keep her image flawless. Each stage tells its own story, starting with her youth, when experts say she already had what plastic surgeons call a perfect foundation. Her face was naturally symmetrical. Her hair was unusually dense on her head and even on her eyebrows, which created a fullness rare in women, and her jawline was already strong, well-defined, and youthful. Yet even in those early years, small details hinted that she may not have relied on nature alone. Her nose, for example, once appeared wider at the bridge, with a fuller tip, but over time it seemed narrower, more sculpted, more refined, a change that experts point to as early rhinoplasty. And this opens the first chapter in the story, because rhinoplasty at a young age, while common among Hollywood hopefuls, often becomes a decision people regret. Later in life, women as young as 14 or 15 sometimes undergo nose reshaping before their faces fully mature, meaning that what looked necessary then may not have been needed at all had they simply waited. This choice foreshadowed what would come next. The idea that beauty was not only a gift, but also a project, a canvas to be managed carefully with science and surgery by 2002. When Lauren was 33, the quiet signs of intervention grew more noticeable. Her forehead looked smoother. Her crow's feet softened, her glabella between the brows, more relaxed. These were the telltale signatures of Botox, but it did not stop there. Her eyebrows appeared to lift higher than before, creating a more youthful, alert expression, something that simple Botox could not achieve on its own, suggesting the likelihood of a brow lift surgery. Her cheeks too told a story. Once naturally soft, they began to show a structured fullness higher and more pronounced than her bone structure alone could explain. Specialists suggest this was the result of cheek implants, a choice designed to sculpt a face that would remain sharp on camera for decades. As for her lips, they began to change as well. The lateral edges appeared fuller, curving outward in a way consistent with fillers in those years. Silicone microdrops were popular for long-lasting enhancement, though modern practice favors hyaluronic acid, and whatever the exact method, the silhouette of her mouth shifted, creating a more striking profile. Though with its own quirks, the central part of her upper lip remained thinner, which gave her a distinctive look that some found captivating and others questioned. By 2003, another subtle detail emerged when she smiled. More of her gums showed a condition known as a gummy smile. Something surgeons warn becomes more noticeable if patients later choose a lip lift, meaning every decision affects the next, and nothing in the transformation process happens in isolation. Then came 2004, when the changes grew harder to dismiss. Her jawline widened at the angles, creating a more squared, more balanced look, suggesting jaw implants combined with her already prominent cheeks. This sculpted her into a sharper, more architectural beauty, a woman whose face seemed designed not to fade in the background, but to command attention. Even as cameras flashed from every angle, her lips continued their journey, with asymmetries forming one side fuller than the other, the kind of detail even the most skilled injectors sometimes cannot avoid. Yet overall, the effect was clear. Lauren Sánchez was no longer the young TV host from the 90s. She was becoming someone else, someone prepared for the global stage, someone who would one day stand beside the world's richest man and look every bit his equal. From 2005 to 2009, Lauren Sánchez appeared to step into a quieter period of her transformation, and yet this calm surface may have been as intentional as the earlier choices she made. Experts note that after a series of visible adjustments, many patients paused not only to recover, but also to let their faces settle into a more natural rhythm. And this seems to be what Lauren did. She maintained her already enhanced cheeks, her more sculpted jaw, her lifted brows, her subtly reshaped lips, but she did not appear to add new dramatic changes during these years. Instead, she relied heavily on maintenance procedures, which in many ways are just as crucial as surgery itself. Botox injections continued smoothing out lines in the forehead, and around the eyes fillers were refreshed to sustain lip volume. Professional skincare remained constant, from laser resurfacing to chemical peels to high-end clinical treatments that only Hollywood elites could access during this period. Lauren perfected what can best be described as camera-ready beauty. Her look was steady, not fluctuating, not changing dramatically, but always polished, always prepared to appear before the lens. Her role as a TV host meant she was still a public face. And in that, world-maintaining consistency is as important as reinventing oneself, suddenly showing up with a new face risk scandal. Whereas slowly settling into enhancements creates the impression of agelessness. And that was the image Lauren built in those years, one of stability, continuity, and quiet investment in her own appearance. But beneath that surface, the seeds of future change were already planted because, as experts point out, once a person undergoes procedures, especially implants or structural adjustments, the long-term trajectory of the face shifts. With age, tissues sag differently, bones resorb differently. The face responds not as nature intended, but as surgery designed. And this means that maintenance is never optional, it is mandatory. To protect earlier investments, then came 2010, a year that brought with it both natural aging and new choices. As Lauren reached 41, her smile revealed something new. Her upper teeth began to show. Even when her lips were at rest, this detail might not mean much to the casual observer, but to experts, it suggests either natural changes in facial dynamics or additional lip-related interventions. What was more striking, however, was the hollowing that appeared beneath her medial cheekbones, a zone known as the buccal fat pad. Its sudden indentation suggested not weight loss, but surgical buccal fat removal, a procedure already available long before it became a 2020s trend. The removal of this deep fat alters the way light and shadow fall across the face, exaggerating cheekbones, creating definition, but also carrying the long-term risk of premature aging. Many who undergo this procedure appear striking in their 40s, but gaunt in their 60s. Nevertheless, in 2010, the effect on Lauren was a sculpted contour that worked harmoniously with her implants, jaw, and brows, presenting an image of sharp precision, while still appearing elegant and balanced. By 2011, another defining feature emerged, one that would eventually become part of her signature look. Her lips took on a unique shape. The lateral parts remained full, while the central section seemed thinner, creating a small gap, a curvature where the middle of her upper lip no longer pressed evenly against the lower lip. This central gap effect exposed her front teeth more when she smiled, and even when she simply parted her lips. Some found this detail captivating, sensual, even adding a hint of intrigue and seduction to her expression. Others saw it as artificial, the product of fillers, migrating or being placed unevenly. Either way, it marked a turning point in her evolution, because now her lips carried not only volume, but also character. They were no longer simply fuller than before. They were distinct, recognizably different instantly. Associated with her face from 2012 through 2014, Lauren once again entered a relatively stable period, one that allowed her face to adapt to all the changes she had accumulated. She did not appear to add dramatic new elements during these years, but instead refined the balance of what she already had. Botox refreshers remained. Routine lip fillers were topped up. Cheek implants maintained their prominence, and her jawline stayed strong. Her brow lift and possible earlier upper eyelid refinements settled into a look that appeared natural to the public eye, yet still sharper than what nature alone would have delivered in this stage. What mattered most was not the introduction of new surgeries, but the consistency of maintenance. Every few months, neurotoxin injections; every year, resurfacing and skin tightening treatments; every so often, small filler adjustments to keep volume distribution precise. And through this steady cycle, Lauren created the illusion of timelessness at a point in life when many women begin to notice accelerating changes. She held her ground, not only holding on but actively sculpting her path forward. These years also aligned with changes in her public presence. She was no longer only a local television figure. She began to transition into the circles of influence that would later place her alongside Jeff Bezos and others in elite Hollywood and business communities. Appearance at this stage became not only about career survival, but about social positioning. She was entering spaces where image meant power, where every woman in the room carried the invisible weight of expectations, and where beauty was as much a form of capital as money itself. And this is where her transformation began to transcend the personal. It was no longer only about how she looked in front of a camera. It was about how she appeared in every room, at every event, at every gathering of people who mattered in media, entertainment, and ultimately in business, and technology circles her image became her passport, her shield, her weapon. A carefully engineered combination of natural gifts, surgical refinement, and unrelenting upkeep that positioned her to step seamlessly into the global stage by the end of 2014. Observers could look back and see how far she had come from the youthful host of the 1990s to a woman who at 45 seemed locked in time. Her cheeks, her jaw, her lips, her brows, her flawless skin all told a story not of radical overnight change, but of gradual layering evolution, not revolution. And yet those who study transformation closely could already see the outlines of what might come next. Because once you reach the midpoint of your 40s after implants, lifts, and injections, the aging process interacts differently with your face, requiring larger decisions to be made in the coming years. And Lauren, as always, would face those crossroads with resources. Most could only dream of resources that would allow her to rewrite the rules, of aging in ways the public would both admire and scrutinize. In 2015, Lauren Sánchez entered her late 40s, a stage of life when the majority of women begin to see sharper signs of aging, but her appearance continued to defy the calendar. Her skin tone remained luminous, her jawline strong, her brows lifted, her cheeks full and contoured, and her lips still carried the signature silhouette she had established earlier. By now, decades of procedures had settled into a look that the public accepted as simply her face. And this is one of the advantages of gradual transformation, because when each adjustment is spread across years, the audience does not notice the line between natural and surgical. They simply adjust their memory of the person to the new version they see. And Lauren had mastered that. Slow evolution through careful planning, expert hands, and relentless maintenance. By 2016, at 47, one of the most striking features about her was the quality of her skin. It appeared flawless, not simply free of wrinkles, but radiant, elastic, and smooth, as if untouched by time. This kind of skin quality is rarely genetic alone. It comes from constant investment in high-end dermatological treatments. Laser resurfacing, fractional CO2, chemical peels, microneedling combined with elite topical regimens. Retinoids, antioxidants, growth factors, peptides, all applied religiously and supported by nutrition and fitness. At this stage, she represented the ideal balance between surgical foundation and non-surgical maintenance. And experts often note that it is this balance that separates those who age gracefully in the public eye from those whose interventions eventually appear obvious. From 2017 to 2020, her appearance remained largely stable, a sign that she was likely relying on regular Botox, refreshers, and filler touch-ups rather than dramatic new surgeries. Her lips remained plump with slight asymmetry. Her cheeks retained their volume. Her brows stayed high. Her skin glowed, and her jawline remained defined. But beneath the stability, the pressure was building. Because by this time, Lauren was no longer just a figure in entertainment. She was moving closer to the orbit of Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder whose life and wealth had made him one of the most photographed men in the world, and this proximity meant that Lauren herself would soon step into a new kind of spotlight, one in which every detail of her appearance would be scrutinized, dissected, and compared not just with her past self, but with every other woman in the billionaire class. And this is where transformation becomes less about personal choice and more about social armor. Because for women in these circles, beauty is not optional. It is expectation, it is survival, and it is power. By the close of the decade, Lauren Sánchez stood as a woman who had managed to hold onto youthfulness into her 50s. Her face reflected not a sudden reinvention, but a carefully orchestrated 2-decade-long project. Each choice building upon the last, each procedure layered so that the result looked continuous rather than fragmented. But as 2020 approached, a new chapter loomed, one that would demand more than maintenance alone, because time spares no one. And the deeper tissues of the face, the ligaments, the fat pads, the skin, elasticity were all beginning to shift, with age implants that once looked perfectly placed needed reconsideration. Brows that had been lifted years earlier required fresh support. Skin that had been resurfaced countless times demanded yet another renewal, and most of all, the public role she was about to take as the partner of the richest man on earth meant that ordinary upkeep would no longer suffice. The coming years would call for dramatic measures, a new wave of transformation. To meet the gaze of the world and to hold it without ever flinching, In 2021, Lauren Sánchez turned 52, and it was at this stage that her transformation reached a peak of precision and drama. This was the year when experts looking closely at her face began to agree that she had undergone a full facelift. Her jawline appeared unnaturally tight for her age. Not a single trace of sagging visible, where most women in their 50s begin to show softening around the chin and jaw instead. Lauren presented a sculpted line sharper than ever before, and this could not be achieved through fillers or Botox alone. It suggested surgical lifting, skin pulled upward, tissues repositioned, ligaments, tightened incisions placed carefully along. The ears and hairline invisible to the casual eye but recognizable to those who study faces. The lift was not done in isolation either, because her brows also appeared higher, more arched than they had in years, a sign of a brow lift procedure often paired with a facelift to restore balance to the upper third of the face. And when brows are lifted, surgeons then evaluate the eyelids, which in Lauren's case looked lighter, less heavy than in the past, suggesting upper blepharoplasty, the removal of excess skin around the eyes, creating a fresher, brighter gaze. The total effect was astonishing. Not an artificial mask, but a face that seemed suspended in time. Her mid-face also told its own story because her cheeks appeared more prominent than ever, leading many to suspect a cheek implant revision in which the original implants placed nearly 2 decades earlier were replaced with newer ones adjusted for aging tissues, larger or differently shaped to maintain projection and harmony. This revision is no small choice. It involves reopening incisions within the mouth, removing scar tissue, and placing new implants. A process with higher risk, but in Lauren's case executed flawlessly. The result was a face that looked powerful, defined, and meticulously maintained. As if to complement these structural changes, her lips too continued their long evolution in 2022. Now at 53, her fillers appeared refreshed with additional volume, especially on the upper lip. But this time, the balance tilted, creating asymmetry. The right side sitting higher than the left. A subtle but noticeable irregularity, typical of hyaluronic acid fillers, which even in expert hands can migrate over time or create unevenness under certain lighting angles. Yet even with these small imperfections, the overall effect was that of a woman who looked decades younger than her age and who had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain an image of perfection. These changes coincided directly with her relationship to Jeff Bezos becoming front-page news, and the scrutiny intensified as paparazzi photos zoomed in on every angle of her face, and commentators speculated endlessly about what had been done, what it cost, and why. The truth was that Lauren's transformation at this stage was not only about beauty, it was about stepping into a role that demanded her to be flawless at every appearance. Standing next to one of the richest men in the world meant there was no room for visible decline, no margin for natural aging, because the world was watching and judging. And she knew it. Each procedure, from the facelift to the brow lift to the eyelid surgery to the cheek implant revision, was part of preparing for that stage. The stage of being not just a television host or a helicopter pilot, but the partner of a man whose image alone defined global headlines through 2021 and 2022. Lauren Sánchez became a case study in the price of perfection. Experts estimated that by this point, her total transformation had cost nearly $390,000, including surgeries, fillers, Botox, skincare, and revisions. And yet the real cost was not only money, it was time, recovery risk, and the constant psychological weight of knowing that her face, her body, her image would forever be analyzed under a microscope by a world eager to find flaws. But she embraced that weight and turned it into armor, stepping into public life with Jeff Bezos. Not as a background figure, but as a woman who could stand on her own, defined by ambition, beauty, and the relentless pursuit of control over how she was seen. By 2023, Lauren Sánchez was 54 years old, yet photographs of her taken alongside Jeff Bezos at events, on yachts, at film premieres, and during vacations showed a woman who looked at least 15 years younger. The surgical work of the past 2 decades had settled into its final stage. Now it was less about dramatic transformation and more about constant upkeep and correction. Her facelift from 2021 held strong but required maintenance through non-surgical skin-tightening treatments, like ultrasound therapy and radiofrequency waves procedures that cost thousands per session and were repeated multiple times a year to keep tissues firm. Botox remained a permanent part of her calendar, refreshed every 3 to 4 months to erase any sign of movement across her forehead and between her brows. The fillers in her lips were adjusted again, subtly softened after criticism that they had become too prominent in late 2022. Her cheeks continued to hold volume, but experts noted that By now, she may have switched partially from implants to fat, grafting a procedure where her own body fat is harvested, purified, and injected into the face, creating a more natural look with less risk of migration. In 2023, the whispers grew louder, about full body maintenance too, because Lauren was often photographed in bikinis and gym wear. Showing a physique that defied her age, she had undergone body contouring procedures, likely liposuction, combined with skin tightening to keep her waist defined and her thighs smooth. Her chest, which had long shown the signs of breast augmentation, appeared revised. Once again, implants possibly replaced for a fresher, more balanced look. The upkeep cost alone on these body procedures ran into six figures, but it was all part of the same philosophy. Image was power and perfection was survival. Then came 2024. At 55, Lauren Sánchez stood as Jeff Bezos' fiancée, soon-to-be wife. Her transformation by now had become less about surgery and more about narrative. She was no longer the local Los Angeles news anchor or the helicopter pilot running her own aerial filming business. She had become the partner of one of the most powerful men alive, and her face was the face of that story. The sharp jawline, the high cheeks, the smoothed forehead, the plumped lips all told the tale of a woman who refused to yield to time. Experts estimated by this stage she had spent well over $500,000 on cosmetic work across her lifetime, and that number would only climb with ongoing maintenance. Yet the money was only part of it, because the true cost was discipline, constant procedures, strict routines, endless appointments, pain-bruising, swelling weeks of hidden recovery, all endured. For the sake of projecting an image of agelessness beyond 2024, the path was clear. Lauren would continue to maintain, not transform. The major work had been done. The foundation laid through facelifts, brow lifts, eyelid surgeries, cheek revisions, lip, fillers, and body contouring. Now it was about sustaining that investment, about keeping skin-tight lines erased, volume balanced, and imperfections hidden. Each year would demand new adjustments, new expenses, new risks. But this was the deal she had, made with herself and with the world, because for Lauren Sánchez, beauty was no longer a choice. It was an identity, a currency, a weapon she wielded in the billionaire world. She now inhabited her transformation across decades, stood as one of Hollywood's most extreme examples of reinvention through cosmetic intervention. And it was not only the story of a woman resisting time, it was the story of a woman shaping power through appearance. And so by the end of 2024, Lauren Sánchez was no longer just a face in the crowd. She was a symbol of what perfection can cost, what it can achieve, and what it demands endlessly in return. Her journey, told in scars, stitches, fillers, and surgical lifts, was one of discipline and ambition, an odyssey of transformation. That made her unforgettable. And yet forever under the microscope, her beauty became both her armor and her burden. A story still being written each time she steps into the spotlight.
This video covers legal allegations in a news context. All claims are from official filings and no guilt is implied until proven in court. Please keep all discussions respectful. Allegations are not facts until proven in court.